Hello everyone, welcome to ChessVisor. In today's video, I'm going to show you the game played between Gukesh and Alexandr Predke. It was from the Chennai Grandmasters 2023, round number 4. With white pieces, Gukesh starts the game with 1 e4. Predke goes Sicilian. After knight f3, knight c6, we are seeing the Nashmedinov Rosalimo attack. And after bishop b5, black goes e5. It looks like a blender for a beginner, but it actually not, because you cannot win a pawn by playing bishop takes c6 and then d takes c6. After knight takes e5, we have this queen to d4. It's a very basic idea which you might have seen in the Roy Lopez exchange variation. So going back in this position, so he castles simply, and then after bishop e7, still you cannot win a pawn, because as you can see, the bishop is on the e7, so blocking this e file. If you go down the same line again by playing bishop into c6, d takes c6, and then knight takes e5, still we can play the move queen to d4. And once the knight drops back, we can simply take on e4. Even if you play rook e1, there is no problem, because the bishop is there on the e7 square, so there is no pin, so the queen can go to g6, and also the bishop is coming to a active square. The game can continue, and also black can neutralize the game immediately. So going back in the game, he plays rook e1. So now actually the threat is renewed. So knight to d4 was played, and then knight takes d4, c takes d4, and then c3, immediately challenging the center. And then we have knight f6, developing the piece. After c takes d4, we have e takes d4, and now as you can see, there is a two pawns in the d file, so we have a doubled pawn. For the time being, the d4 pawn is like a thorn in the white's camp, because it will kind of restrict the white's development. So here we play a pawn to d3, or the Gukesh plays d3, and then castles, knight to d2, and then knight pawn to d5. So we go e5, so we don't have to help the black to undouble his pawn. So knight goes to d7, and then knight f3. The knight is not only attacking the or protecting the pawn, or also attacking the d4 square. So queen b6, threatening the bishop, and also trying to guard the pawn. Bishop a4, and then knight c5, threatening the bishop again. The bishop drops back to c2, as like in the Roy Lopez. So we have bishop g4 pinning down the knight, and after h3, bishop h5, he maintains the pin, but here Gukesh wins the pawn by force g4, and then bishop to g6, and then knight takes d4. So here he goes knight e6, trying to win a knight here actually. So here actually we have multiple options for white, especially dropping the knight back to f3, which was actually happened in the game. But if you want to improve the knight post, you might have thought about putting the knight on f5 square. It's actually an active post for the knight. So it's actually interesting variation also to check. So bishop can go to c5, threatening f2, and then bishop e3. Bishop takes e3, f into e3, and then queen takes b2. After queen takes b2, we can go pawn to d4 before trying to attack the queen here. And then the plan is very simple, just park the king onto the g2 or g3. Just try to open up the h file using the major pieces. You can easily carry out the attack. So this could be a interesting plan for white when you go knight f5. But in the game he played knight f3, and then rook a c8 kind of is not actually a threat, but it could be a threat of capturing the bishop later if he forms the battery. So he goes bishop b3, immediately gets out of this idea, and also he targets this pawn now. Queen b5, usually when you see a queen defending a point, it cannot be an ideal defender. As you witness in the game, you'll see the problem of queen defending the pawn in just a moment. So pawn to d4, now he get rid of this weak pawn on the d3 square, because the queen was attacking the d3. Bishop to b4, and here Gukesh interestingly played the move rook e3. Here actually, if you calculate like couple of moves, you will see there is a problem when the knight comes to f4. But Gukesh calculated far than that, and he went with this variation because he already won a pawn. It looks like after knight f4, actually he plays bishop to d2 now. So interesting thing is that you could play the bishop to d2 when the bishop comes to b4 immediately. So let's say bishop can take, and then queen takes d2, and then the game goes on, and there is no problem, and you keep the extra pawn. And also you are covering the f4 square, because you cannot put the knight on f4. So going back in the game, he plays rook e3, which allows the knight to come to f4. Now also I was wondering why Gukesh did not save the pawn on h3. Here actually he played bishop to d2 now. If you want to save the pawn, you could play the move king to h2, and then bishop goes to e7, because a3 is coming, and rook c3. After exchanging the rooks, we can play the move knight to d3, threatening f2, and then bishop e3. White is doing fine, and in fact white is slightly better. Going back, what was played in the game was really interesting because after bishop to d2, his idea is very simple. He gives up the h pawn, maybe to use the h file for his major pieces, as I mentioned in the opening. So king to g2 and knight f4 check, and he plays with the king. King to g3 threatens the knight. The knight goes back to e6. After a4, trying to deflect the queen away from defending the bishop, and also there is a tactical idea because it looks like we lost a pawn, but actually Gukesh is going to gain the pawn back. That was the calculation he did when he played, or when he allowed the knight come to f4. So queen a5 threatening the bishop, or it is not actually a threat because the knight is defending. Bishop takes b4 and then queen takes b4, and finally he wins the pawn there. After rook to c2, but it allows the black pieces to come into our camp. So pawn to b3, rook to d8 threatening the bishop, and the bishop to c4, knight takes d4, and then knight takes d4, where I think he plays the move rook to d2, so tactically wins the pawn back. Queen to e1, so you have to take back with the 8th rank rook. So after e6, this is the critical moment of the game actually. There are a couple of options available for white to go with the initiative. One of the move was to play e6, which was played in the game, and one another is to play the move rook a2, because it's very natural, because you are trying to attack the pinned piece further. So going back in the game, he plays e6. So here he goes queen to d6 check. After forcing the king to go to h3, here he plays another move which is kind of losing the game in the spot. So he played actually pawn to h5. So here I would like to highlight the time pressure, because here actually Gukesh was not in the time pressure because he was having around 16 minutes in his clock, and Alexandr Predke was having 2 minutes in his clock. Pawn to h5 was played, which allows Gukesh to push down the pawn, and then after rook takes g4, which is not actually a forcing move, because now we can promote the queen and he gets a new queen. So going back in this position, what could be a better variation when we push the pawn? So after this move, so instead of h5, we could have played, or black would have played pawn takes pawn, and then rook takes e6 threatening the discovery. I think this is the place where Alexandr Predke could have gone wrong, because he missed one small calculation here. You have to play a brilliant move in this position to defend this position, because you are under a big discovery. You have to sack the rook like this. Rook second rank to the d3 check. Bishop takes d3, and then rook takes d3 comes with the check, and then king to g2, and you finally play the move queen to f4. There is no rook to e1 check because of the bishop guarding the square. So this could be another way for black to get out of this problem, but still white is kind of better. But however, if you see the king's position carefully, it looks like we are completely exposed, but black's king is kind of are comparatively safer than our king. So going back in the game, he played h5, which blunders the game, as I said. So e7, rook takes g4, which is not a forcing move. You captured a piece, but you are threatening mate in couple of moves, but we have the move in our side, so you can simply promote the queen. King h7, and then bishop takes f7 was played. So queen f6 threatening mate in 1, and then here actually there are many ways to continue the game, and are only 2 ways to go with the full advantage. Example, the move which was played in the game, that is bishop takes g6, and another move was to consider queen to g8 check, because this is also interesting variation. There is one cute reason behind this variation. I would like to highlight that. So after king h6, you go queen h8 check. You have to black with the bishop, and then you play the move rook to e6, pinning down the queen and win the queen. If you play, or if you force the king to go to the f1, which was actually played in the game in that particular variation. So if you play not rook d3 check, but you play rook h4 check, king to g2, and then rook g4 check. After king f1, you can take with the rook takes f2 check, which was actually played in that variation, as I said. But now we can simply take with the queen, but still the queen is under the pin, but the rook is having the guard, that is the bishop. So if we compare the variation which was played in the game, after queen f6, Gukesh simply took the bishop. After bishop takes g6 check, king h6, queen h8 check, king takes g6, and then he goes rook e6, pinning down the queen. But now comes rook h4 check, king to g2, and then rook g4 check, and then king f1. And here actually Predke takes on f2 with the check, and then after queen takes f2, he goes queen takes e6, but still Gukesh is having up a whole queen here. So after rook e1 threatening the queen, and the queen goes to a6 and gives the check, and after rook e2 blocking the check, and in this position it was 44th move, and here actually Alexandr Predke resigned the game actually. Why he has to resign? It's because Gukesh is up whole queen, and he's going to be checkmated in maybe like 4 or 5 moves. Maybe if you even defend like a computer, it will go like 7 8 moves. So considering this, Alexandr Predke resigned the game. So what do you think about this game? Let me know your thoughts, ideas in the comment section below. If you like this quick analysis, please give it a thumbs up. And still, if you're not subscribed to my YouTube channel, consider subscribing to the channel. And as usual, this is Chesswiser, your wise choice to improve your chess.